What is up, everybody? It's the Koosh Doctor here. Time for Tier List 2.0. We have had a different type of arena. Last week we saw in the tournament arena some characters prospered, some characters still did great, other characters did not do as well. So now we have got to factor all of that in to our Tier List 2.0. We've also had some more time with all of these characters to practice them, to see what people are using in the arena, to see what people are using in the tournament, to see who's good, to see who's bad. A lot of you left comments on my last video. Thanks so much. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I know tier lists are super popular for people, so we're going to keep them coming. Hopefully every week and a half to 2 weeks or so. That way we can see how the meta is changing, how the characters are changing, how the popularity is changing. Maybe we're going to start to see some characters that can counter the meta characters become more popular. So we will see how things go. Thanks to TierMaker for making these awesome tiers for us. You can go to tiermaker.com, find them for free. And they've already got all the pictures right on there. It makes it super easy. You can save it, download it. It's amazing. Thanks to Snowprint Studios. This game is fantastic. I've been playing the tabletop game forever, and it has been a blast, and I love that they've come out with this game. It's not perfect. There's a few things that are still frustrating, but they've done a really great job with it, and they've really helped make it feel a lot like the tabletop game, while also giving it its own kind of unique flair as well. We're going to do this tier list a little bit differently. I wanted to set this up just so people could see things a little bit easier, make it a little easier to view, especially for newer people who don't recognize a lot of the characters from their little images down on here. So let me know if you like this one a little bit better, if you prefer something else, and we will get going through it. We're not going to go, hopefully, as in-depth on everyone as we did previously. I'll try to make this one a little bit quicker. I'd like to keep them in the 30-minute range, just so that people aren't having to watch hours of me talk just to figure out who's on the tier list. And I'll try to get better about also putting timestamps in on the YouTube videos, so that way you guys can find. I'll try to do them in faction chunks. That way you can see your favorite faction and go through there. And especially as they start adding more factions to the game, that should become a lot more helpful. So we're also going to spread out this tier list a little bit more. Last time I was really kind of S through C. I also had all summoners in the S tier. Spoiler alert, it is not going to be that way this time. We've had some more time to practice with them. We've seen what summoners are good and which ones aren't, and we've even got a few characters that are better than some of the summons out there. I'll try to go through a little recap of each character, my experiences with them, and then we'll kind of throw them in places. So we're going to start out with Tigurius. He's the first guy that you get. He's your Ultramarines librarian. He is okay. He's not super great. You're going to need him for the campaign mode, so he is a necessary evil. You are going to have to level him up a certain amount just to get through your campaign, but unfortunately, he's not super strong. I am going to make a video at some point in time that is going to talk about the different types of damage, but that is going to become very important. And the other thing is, I did a lot of research before the first tier list on stats and numbers and what all these things mean over on the side, and sometimes in practice they didn't quite work out that way. And in the tournament arena, when everyone was supposed to be leveled out the same to common, it still didn't feel like all of these numbers went the way they were supposed to. Tigurius does psychic damage, which is supposed to have a high pierce ratio, right? So in theory, going against stronger characters with more armor, he should be able to get through a lot better, but it just doesn't seem like that's working out for him in practice. I'm going to start him out in the B tier. So again, he's not super strong. He's going to be a necessary evil. You're going to have to use him. He can do some AoE damage because his active attack can hit up to 4 targets, which is nice, but he's not super strong. And his ability to give block to the characters around him also doesn't seem to work that great as well. Block is it's a weird mechanic. I like it, right? but it seems like it's an all or nothing. So you get lucky with block, you block a bunch of damage, it can save a character, but you can't really rely on it. And especially when you are doing the tournament arena, you just can't afford to have all of your characters blocked together, because there's so much AoE damage that people have found with some of the stronger characters out there. You just can't bunch your team up like that. It's just not very helpful, and it's going to get you killed. So Tigris is going to start us out in the B tier. Certus. I have a new love for Certus. He did really well in tournament. Even though he does a lot of single target damage, he does a lot of single target damage. He also infiltrates, so what you would see a lot in the tournament arena is people were moving their Certus up and leaving him so that he could overwatch. Well, if your Certus was strong enough, you could move your Certus up, he wouldn't get overwatched, and you could take out their Certus, and that way you could move the rest of your characters in. But he's very strong to start out with. You can push him forward into the danger zone, and somebody basically has to throw a unit out there and hope that they can survive his shot. I like to put crit chance and crit damage items on him, just to get those higher damage possibilities. So if he does shoot somebody, hopefully you can take them out. And again, he's one that you need for the campaign modes. Even though he can't do AoE damage, he does a lot of damage to single targets, and he does really well piercing, getting through their armor. So that is very helpful. Bellator. I love Bellator. In the first video, he was one of my favorite characters. I'm dialing back on him a little bit now. He's very tanky, right, because of the Gravis armor. I hope they do this to Terminator armor, but we'll get into that when we talk about Terminator characters in a little bit. So any incoming damage has to go through armor twice, basically. That makes him very tanky, but he really doesn't do much damage. Even though he's done, he hits 6 times, and you need him in the campaign to kill scarabs. He's a very good scarab killer, and he's also the reason that in tournament and campaign you want to have him leveled up in case you are seeing a lot of scarabs out on the board. He is going to be the one that can counter that. And just like we talked about a second ago with Certus, Bellator is one of the ones who you can jump out in the beginning to take that Certus shot, and then you can spawn more Bellators if you want to, or you can try to hold off on that a round or two. That is one of the things that makes him a little weaker as a summoner also. You need to wait longer before you can get the max amount of summons from him. Again, he's very good in the campaigns. I love using him as the guild raid because later on you can just spawn 4 or 5. Once you get his second ability so that the other Bellators next to him are attacking, you can do a bunch of damage to the guild raid boss. But again, he doesn't do a great amount of damage even though he hits 6 times. So really good against things like scarabs, generally not too great about everything else. We are going to leave him in the A tier, but he's actually going to be below Certus in that A tier for now. We'll go back at the end too if we get through this quick enough just to recap and make sure we have everyone where we want them to be. Incisus, my boy, I love you. I tried everything I could to get Incisus powerful. I tried to level his abilities way up. As some of you may know, this is my second account, which I use for the YouTube videos. But on my main account, I tried giving him all this equipment and leveling him up, and I just can't get him to work very well. He can be useful in certain situations, and even in the tournament arena, when he would jump in and get a big heal off after there had been some AoE damage, it can turn things around. But he really doesn't do that much damage. He's supposed to do a lot of piercing damage, right? But he still can't one-shot characters. And right now, you either have to be tanky enough or mobile enough to stick around and move around, or you've got to be able to one-shot things. I've always been a healer in video games. I love my healers. I love my apothecaries in the tabletop game. But unfortunately, our boy Incisus is just not very good. You're going to swap him out as early as you can for a second or for a different Imperial character when you are doing the campaign. So unfortunately, you're just really not going to use him much. And right now, he's just not terribly strong, unfortunately. I love you, buddy. All right, Calgar. I don't have him unlocked on either of my accounts, but from what I've seen of him, he does have Gravis armor just like Bellator does, so he is relatively tanky. He does have some okay abilities. He can help some of the other characters out, but he is not ultra strong for a legendary. Congratulations if you do get him to drop, but he's probably only a B tier legendary. You really don't see him a lot. Not a lot of people have him, and when they do, you still don't see him used very often. All right, let's go to our sisters now. Vindicta is insanely powerful once you get her to uncommon. So once you get the ability for her to blow up additional squares, she becomes incredibly powerful. You also have to notice that what happens with her is each time another Imperial unit kills somebody, or an Imperial unit is killed on your team, her crit chance goes up. And then she can double shoot with her active ability, which is very awesome. And then once you get her up to the uncommon, she can hit one hex and then every hex around it. The thing that is difficult about her is you have to be very, very careful with her with your own team, because she can damage your own team. So it's very difficult to learn the balance between waiting to kill a couple of things so her crit gets up, but also being able to keep your characters back far enough so that she's not killing them. But she can do a very good job with her AoEs of wiping out summons, of wiping out characters. If she gets the first hit off, she can really do some damage. And one of the nice things in the tournament arena is when people are looking at their danger zones, um, it looks like she can barely hit them. But if you have people lined up out of the danger zone and she hits the front person and there are people right next to them, again, her secondary ability there will do damage to them as well. Vindicta's a good character to get leveled up. She's super strong. She's great in the campaign, and she's great in the arena. I love having her. I don't use her as much on the guild raids just because the fire doesn't do a ton of damage to those big bosses, but pretty much every other thing she's very, very good for. Isabella. Isabella is the best healer in the game right now. She can also get summons back, which is absolutely fantastic. Um, when she's next to a character, so Incisus has an ability where sometimes if he's next to a character, they will revive. Isabella does healing every time. So anytime somebody next to her gets hit, she's going to heal them. Her active ability heals herself and everybody around, and it can revive a friendly Imperial character and up to 2 summons. So that is an absolute beast mode that she can do there. She's not, if you get her early on, she is ultra powerful. She's great to have in the arena. She's great to have everywhere. It is fantastic to have somebody like that who can revive people on your team. She is going to head straight up, if I can find her, into the top of the A tier. She is outstanding. If you get her early on, you're very lucky. Morvenn Vahl. The first time I made this video, I had pulled Morvenn Vahl on this account, which was fantastic. She is so cool. Her active ability does a mountain of AoE damage. What is less exciting is when you get into the tournament arena and everybody is evened out. Unfortunately, she is just not that strong. She'll do a little damage to everybody, but she doesn't tend to kill anyone, and she is not strong enough for whatever reason to take much damage. Her ranged attack, the bolter, really doesn't do much damage either. It does a few hits, so she's okay against scarabs, but really you're going to want to get her in close combat. She's not very strong there. When she dies, she explodes. Also, make sure to remember that she is a machine. Unlike a lot of the other human characters, her being a machine, a lot of times she can't get rezzed like by your Isabella because she's considered mechanical. She doesn't work with Incisus either, but she can work with like some of the orc characters that can heal vehicles and things like that. So unfortunately, as much as I loved Morvenn Vahl, she's really not as powerful as I first thought she was going to be. She's going to be our first one in the C tier. Roswitha, she just had the most recent event that everybody went through. And again, kind of like Incisus, I tried everything I could do to get her powerful. I got her leveled all the way up to epic. I tried leveling up her abilities on my other character or on my other account. And she's just, again, she's not very powerful. She doesn't have AoE. When you get her in close combat against a psyker, she can do some decent damage, but she still won't always one hit. I was really hoping that she was going to be the answer to the counter for a lot of people having Tigurius and a lot of people having Archimatos, but she's just not that strong. She can't always one-shot them. And right now, if you can't one-shot somebody in the tournament arena, they are going to hit you back stronger generally, and she's not strong enough to stick around. She is going to Honestly, she's probably got to go down there with Incisus down in the D tier. I was really hoping she'd be better. We are seeing some psychers out there, but she's just not very strong, unfortunately. When you had those quests where you had to kill a certain amount of enemies or do a certain amount of damage with her, they just took forever, and they were mind-numbingly grindy because she's so weak. Sorry, girl. Celestine. Celestine is a monster. If you are lucky enough to get her, she is an incredible character. She has a ton of mobility, the most mobility in the game because she can move from the second round to anywhere on the board next to somebody and then attack them. And she does more damage as you level it up. That is incredibly powerful in the regular arena, in the tournament arena. She is just great. And her second ability, just like we'll see later on with Creed, is ultra strong because it saves her from being one hit. Because when somebody goes to attack her, a Gemini Superior hops out and saves her. Right? So that is an incredible ability. Celestine is easily S tier. She's one of my favorite characters in the whole game. I have her on my other account. I love her to death. She is amazing. All right, that'll do it for the sisters. Let's move on to the Necrons, who unfortunately are probably, they and Black Templars right now are probably the weakest ones. In the whole game at the moment. Again, you need to use Necrons for the Indomitus Mirror campaign, and you'll see these first three that we go through are going to be the main ones that you use. Only one of them is really, really strong, and really do you use them outside of the Indomitus Mirror. Makotep does have kind of a cool ability. His active ability makes non-character units, so all of your summons that are directly around him can activate a second time. So when you are going through the Indomitus Mirror, it's really helpful to have your Aleph Null summons, the little scarabs, drop down, and then you can use Makotep's active ability to make them move again. And a lot of times they'll multiply and go out and do other things. So you run Aleph Null up, you drop down a couple of scarabs, you run Makotep into the middle of them, you activate his ability. Each of the scarabs spawns an extra scarab, so on turn 2 you've already got 4 sets of scarabs. That's really helpful in the beginning. He's just not super strong later on. He does at least move 3 and attack 3, which is nice. So he's got a little bit of range with him. But again, overall, just not a very strong character. He does give extra movement to people around him once you've got him up to uncommon, which can make things kind of interesting when you are in the tournament arena because they can't tell the danger zone properly. But once the game fixes that, he's not going to be very popular. And he's just not super strong overall. He is, I guess we'll throw him in the C tier just to be nice. But he's just not a very strong character. Emma Spec, my boy. It seems like the characters that I love the very most in the tabletop game are some of the very worst in this game, which sucks, but that's just the way it is. Incisus the Apothecary, I love. Emma Spec, when I first got him on my other account, I was so excited to have him. They call him the Gloctopus because he looks kind of like an octopus. He's got all the arms with the guns and the pistols. He's super cool on the tabletop. I love the model. I love everything about him. In the game, he is horrifically terrible. When you get him up to uncommon, which I did on my other account, you get really excited, right? Because what happens is he takes 6 shots. And then when you are overwatching, if he kills something, he then reloads his overwatch and can kill something again. In the early stages of the campaign, the Indomitus Mirror, it was really cool because you could have little summons or low health characters would run up and he could just boom, kill one, Overwatch, boom, kill another one, Overwatch, boom, kill another one, Overwatch. But in the arena, and as you start moving up in the Indomitus Mirror, he doesn't manage to kill things in one shot, so he won't reset his Overwatch, and his second ability basically becomes useless. His active ability, because he's only got 2 hexes that he can shoot on, it's not even remotely as powerful as Volk's that we'll see later on. He has a 3 hex range, which makes it a lot easier. It's really hard with Imispec to get him in close to be able to do his active ability and kill a bunch of things. He seemed like he was strong when you were going up against him in the Indomitus campaign, but when you're actually using him, he's terrible, and he is made of paper thin glass. He will not last very long. He dies super quickly, and he doesn't do enough damage to kill things. It's unfortunate. I love you. You've got the best nickname. You've got one of the best models in the whole game. But unfortunately, you are terrible at the moment in Tacticus. Sorry, dude. Aleph Null, on the other hand, he's headed straight up to the S tier. I have got him very well leveled up on my other account, and he basically runs the show. Scarabs can be very powerful, especially if people are starting to go away from Bellator, who's their counter at the moment. Um, Aleph Null is ultra strong, having the scarabs that you can put out. Generally, when you move him up, he's tanky enough that he can take a hit, so you can move him up and take that first hit from the sniper whose name I just forgot. You can take the first hit from him, and then you can drop your scarabs down. Generally, as long as you are dropping 2 sets of scarabs down, he can kill any character in the game. There are not a lot of characters that can survive him dropping the 2 scarabs down and then both attacking. He also can kill off scarabs, so when the other person has their Aleph Null, because he has 5 attacks with his particle beams, he can kill off the other scarabs. And the other underrated part of him is that if you've got other mechanical units around him, when he is moving around, right when he moves next to something, he auto heals them. So you can use an active heal, which he has, but even from moving next to something, it will auto heal them, which is ultra, ultra powerful. Aleph Null is a beast. I love him to death. Of course, he's going up in the S tier. I don't know right now if we want to put him in front of or behind Celestine, but just because summons are still so strong right now, I'm going to go ahead and put him number 1 at the moment, and we will revisit that later on. Tutmos. Tutmos is a character that you really don't see around a lot. I mean, he's pretty cool. He's extremely difficult to beat in the Indomitus campaign, but when you get him as a character, he is not quite as powerful. He again is almost another version of Tigurius, where he's moving around and he's doing some damage. But he does not necessarily do enough damage, and again, he is not super tanky, so you really don't have the ability to keep him around for long enough to continue to do damage, but it is kind of nice again that he has AoE. He's a little bit stronger than Tigurius is, so we're going to go ahead and put him in the B tier, but right above Tigurius. our last Necron is our Necron Overlord, Anafet. I love Anafet because, again, he is a summoner. You really don't see him um, around very much, but he's relatively tanky. And his uncommon ability at the start of the turn, he damages something around him. So that is really nice, really helpful. And again, you can resurrect and use him for summoning. He is going to go up into the S tier. You don't see him a ton, but if you are lucky enough to have him, if you either got him from a requisition or you've managed to grind far enough through the Indomitus campaign that you've got him, once you get him, you are going to love him. So if you manage to get lucky and get him early on, go ahead and level him up. He'll help you out in the Indomitus mirror, and he's going to help you out everywhere as well. He is a beast. So that's the end of the Necrons. Honestly, they're either you've got your two that are super strong, and then you've got a couple that are and then you've got one that unfortunately is terrible. All right, let's head over to the Black Legion. I probably incorrectly said Chaos a million times last time, but technically we have two Chaos factions. The Black Legions are the ones that you need for the Fall of Cadia campaign. The first one that we were starting out with, Angrax, is unfortunately the worst. He has a cool ability to teleport, which is really neat. It really gives you a feel like the tabletop, because in the tabletop game, Terminators have the ability to do that, start off and then come in, but he can't attack after he teleports, so really you're just teleporting him in to get hit. He's not that tanky, so unfortunately you're teleporting him up to die, and he's really not doing anything unless you're moving him up to take out Overwatch and sacrifice him. He does have AoE damage when he is attacking, but you have to be up next to them. You'll notice I'm still trying to figure out if the Chaos are going to be a good counter for summons, because you'll notice a lot of their abilities trigger battle fatigue, which is basically feared, making them run away. In the tabletop game, it's kind of like the when you fail a morale check and they run away. So that's the same general idea here, but they call it battle fatigue. A lot of the Chaos characters have abilities that use that, but I haven't seen it be super powerful yet in practice. We're going to put him in the C tier for now. He's okay, but he's definitely the worst of the Chaos characters, unfortunately. Then we will move to Volk. Volk you do not need for the campaign, but he is kind of a neat character. Obviously, he looks really cool. Obliterator models are also very awesome in the regular game. His main ability, kind of like we talked about earlier with Immaspec, is that he can jump forward. And unlike Immaspec, the reason why he's better is that he will attack everything that's in range. So 6 times heavy round damage to everything within 3 hexes of him. And then they also get suppressed, which means they can't move as far and they can't overwatch. So if he jumps up into somebody and shoots a whole bunch of things, he's very, very handy in the campaign. He's very handy in the tournament. He can do a bunch of AoE damage. He's relatively tanky. He's tanky enough. And he can just be very helpful. So if you do get him, don't be afraid to level him up. He looks cool. He's got some good range. He doesn't move very far, but at least he's got some decent range, and his active ability can do some pretty good damage. So we're going to go ahead and put him up at the bottom of the A tier. Next is Archimatos. Archie is, in my opinion, the strongest character in the game. He has his regular attack is AoE, so it's psychic. It bounces. He can do a decent amount of damage in close combat. He is a summoner. and he is just overall a monster. So he will summon bloodletters down. Once you get his ability leveled up high enough, he'll drop down at least 4. I haven't made it far enough to see if he will drop down 5 at all, but they're just really strong. These bloodletters in every area are stronger than characters are half the time. They can run around, they generally take 2 hits to die, and they generally one hit almost everything. I believe they do psychic damage, which means it goes through armor. They tend to be extremely effective against things with armor. And again, if he kills something, he can spawn one, and then he can also spawn things to kill something. So he's just spawning all over the place. He is not super tanky, so you have to be careful not to run him forward. But if you can manage to get the first hit, so he's throwing out summons, and they don't have something that flies, then he is very effective. Actually, yeah, we'll get into the flight talk, I guess, here in a second. But I think Archie's the most popular or the most powerful character in the game right now. As soon as you get him, just go ahead and level him up as far as you can. He's a beast. Harkin. I like Harkin a lot. I got a new appreciation for him in the new arena, in the tournament arena. His mobility and his damage are both very, very good. Um, so the difference between he and Bellator is that he can jump forward. Again, like we talked about with our Chaos characters, they do that battle fatigue enhancement. So he can make summons run away, which is very helpful. He can also move a good distance, and he gets stronger as he kills things. So as these battles go along, as you're killing things, he's getting more and more and more damage and getting extra hits. So that's really powerful. It only works against characters. Since you only have 5 characters, I mean, he doesn't get super overpowered, but he's still very strong. And the ability to fly is extremely helpful. I'm going to put him in the A tier. Right now, we're going to throw him right behind Certus and kind of see how it works out. But I definitely think he's in a good spot. When you get him, he's a good character to level up. And he is a character that you need for the Fall of Cadia campaign. So once you get him, go ahead and level him up. You get him, his shards come from doing the regular arena. And then after you get through your first quote-unquote season, which is like a week, of your regular arena, you'll get 100 of his shards. So after 2 to 3 weeks, you should have him, and then you can continue to get his shards to level him up as you go along from the regular arena. All right. Last but not least is Abaddon. He is one of my favorite characters in the whole lore in the tabletop game. He was my very first model that I ever bought. I love him to death. He is good in the game. He can do, multiple hits when he moves in close, but he's not super tanky, and he doesn't do a ton of damage, but he is pretty good. And one of the interesting things about him, he can buff some of the characters around him, which is nice for the Black Legion. And you'll see when we get to the Death Guard here in a second, they also buff each other as well, which is kind of helpful. But again, a lot of these characters, you are not going to want to get grouped up in the arena modes because that just leaves you susceptible to AoE damage and more likely to die. We're going to put Abaddon at the top of the B tier. If you get him, he's good. There's definitely nothing wrong with leveling him up, but he doesn't do anything really well either way. He doesn't do a ton of damage, and he's not super tanky, so he's kind of in the middle. Again, he and Calgar are kind of similar ideas for those legendary characters. All right, that's our Black Legion. Sorry, my voice is giving out on me a little bit today, so just drinking some water. We are going to move over to orcs. I am very glad that orcs are part of this game. They're one of the coolest factions in the lore. Their players are always a ton of fun to play against. Their characters are cool, as you can see from the names, and just, you know, all of their models. They're just a lot of fun, and they're very cool. So Snotflogga is actually a summoner. I started him out in the S tier in my first video, but the more I used him and the more I played with him, I found out he's not extremely powerful. His grots that he drops down are not very strong, and they're hard to get down. You really need to learn how to work with them. But what happens is you have to move up next to somebody, and then the grots drop down if there are open hexes that have enemies next to them. So you need this guy, an open space, and then an enemy, and he'll drop the little grots down. They're not really tanky. They don't do a ton of damage, so unfortunately, he's not massively strong. He does do a couple of attacks. He's okay in melee. Um, and when he moves, his little runt guy, bites somebody. But again, it's not a very strong attack. Um, I'm probably actually, I wanted to put him in the B tier, so I guess we'll just throw him in the B tier. He's almost low B, high C, but he's not the best. I was really excited to have him. Again, he's a neat looking model, but just doesn't do a ton of damage. Gibbous Scraps, I like him a lot, but again, he is a summoner that is similar to Bellator in the way that his tank becomes stronger um, as the turns go along. So he's good for things like the guild raid, or in the campaign where you know you can wait with him. But for the most part, you don't want to wait too long before his tank comes down. His tank does a decent amount of damage, um, but he does not. I love the tank. He also gives armor. Once he gets uncommon, he gives armor to characters around him, which is nice. Um, but again, as we saw with Tigurius, um, it's just armor is not that powerful, and it's a real coin flip mechanic the way they've got it set up. So you either get lucky and you block a ton of damage. It's almost like a dodge the way you block things. But if you get unlucky and it doesn't work, then you can't rely on that for making your characters tanky. You need things like the Gravis armor, or a ton of health, to be tanky. So I love my boy here. He's a ton of fun. You're going to want to get him, and level him up, but he's going to go down in the B tier. So there you go. 2 summoners in the B tier right now, 1 in the A, 2 up in the S. So you guys can't say that I phoned this one in for just putting all of the summoners in the S tier. S tier is no longer for summoner. There you go. Snappereka, the Killican. He is one of the ones that you do need to get for the campaign. He's actually pretty cool. I've got a newfound love for him. I thought he was kind of weak early on. Something that's neat is you'll notice some of these characters will have a melee attack and a shooting attack. Some are just one or the other. His are actually both relatively decent. He's a little bit closer though to Morven Vol, where his close combat attack does more damage, so that's where you want to get him. And his range attack will do a few attacks, but it doesn't do a ton of damage. He has the ability to run into things, but it hurts himself. I used to think that was really bad, but one of the cool things that you can do in the tournament arena is run him forward, and we'll talk about that mobility again when we get to Tank Smasher. But you can run the Killican Snappereka. You can run him forward. You can knock somebody off the point. You can do damage to them. And the cool thing is, any of these characters that are mechanical will explode when they die. He is another mechanical character that'll explode when he dies, and he's more likely to do more damage if you use his ability to run into somebody. So you can run into someone, push him off the point, you take over the point, and then he explodes and does more damage to people around him if he dies. So that's very handy, very cool to have. So again, he's like a slightly better version of Morgenval. So we're gonna go ahead and put him right up at the top of the C tier. Um, he's hovering around. This B and C tier is, I mean, they're all kind of in the middle. So if you get any one of these characters and you get them leveled up, um, we should probably move him down to the D tier. If you get any of these characters and you get them leveled up, they will not be the worst thing ever. They do have certain situations where they can be strong, but overall, you're going to want your resources elsewhere if you can afford to do it. Unfortunately, these three guys right here that we see you use in the campaigns, so you're going to have to level them up a certain amount anyways. But Snapareka isn't too bad. He's an okay guy to get leveled up. Tank Smasher. On my other account, he was my rare pull. With my first 10 pull, he was the rare character that I got. A lot of people like him in the um, tournament arena because just like our Killacan, Snapareka, Tank Smasher, it's hard to remember all these names. Hopefully y'all can deal with the fact that some of them I can remember and some of them I can't. But anyways, Tank Smasher looks super cool. He can run all the way across the board potentially with his active ability if you don't run into like a wall or like some type of obscuring terrain. Sometimes that's really hard to see and it makes him difficult to use, and he is not as tanky as he should be. Um, for being such a great character and for being like a riding character. You feel like he should get maybe double hit points or something, just for having both of them. But unfortunately, he doesn't. And if you run in and you're trying to run into people and move them out of the way, and you can't tell that a piece of terrain is tall, and he just runs into it and stops and doesn't do anything, he's completely wasted. But once you learn things, you learn the boards, you figure out where things are, he can actually run across on certain tournament arena maps and take over all 3 points at once. So he can very sneakily take over and win a game for you. A couple of little tips with him. His Smash a Squig doesn't do a ton of damage on the attack back. So unfortunately it's fun because when people attack him, his Smash a Squig will bite him back, but usually it doesn't do a ton of damage. The other thing is when he is doing his run across ability, the Unstoppable Momentum, you can do it after he is already moved, but you need to make sure that none of your characters are in the hex that you want to go in the direction of. So he needs open hexes to start his run. So just make sure you're paying attention to your own movement. One of the things I do really like in this game is the tactical approach. I know it's kind of confusing, but all the different rules really makes it feel like the tabletop game because it has a ton of rules and it's confusing. Um, and then the movement being so important. Movement is really, really important in the tabletop game, and it's also important in Tacticus. Um, I love this character. He can definitely do some damage in close combat, um, but he is not really that strong overall. All right, last orc, Boss Golgorts. He is a beast. I love this guy. He has multi-attack, so when you run in and you attack something in close combat, his little dude on the top will shoot at stuff. They can even shoot at stuff a couple of hexes away, so it's really nice that he can run in, bust something up big time in close combat, and then his little dude can shoot something on top. He is pretty tanky. His active ability to do the WOG is very difficult to use correctly and relies on a lot of experience to use well. It still has a little bit of randomness, and you really can't control, unless you get really good at it, you can't control where your own guys are going, and a lot of times you're just sending them into their death, and you have to be really careful with like the barbed wire and that type of stuff. So as you can see, I don't really use it that much, but he's a really strong character. He's a lot of fun. He's a good one to get leveled up. I'm going to throw him at the top of the B tier. He's my favorite, and I think the most effective orc character that we've got at the moment. Sorry, I know a lot of you orc fans out there were really excited, but most of them are not the most effective characters out there. So at least you have them for that campaign, the Octarius campaign, um, and you can use them to get the Black Templars. So it's a fun campaign. They're fun characters to have. I like their abilities. They really give a uniqueness about the game, and it's hard not to be a fan of orcs. And generally, the people who play orcs are also very cool as well. All right, let's head into our Imperial Guard. Unfortunately, not the strongest group, but they do have a couple that really stand out. Um, Divine is pretty terrible. She is the worst of the psychers in the game. You've got to get her for the campaign. But again, as we've kind of seen when you look at these campaigns, it seems like each campaign has one character at least that's very, very weak. And it's frustrating because you have to level them up to get through certain campaign levels, but you really can't use them in other places. Divine is going to be like that. She just doesn't do a ton of damage. She's not tanky at all. You have to level her up for the campaign. So level it up, as minimal as you can. Once I get deeper into that campaign, we'll have some videos out about just how high you have to get her before you can stop. But again, we see Divine, we see Angrax, we see Immaspec. All of these characters that you have got to use, Tigurius actually ends up being in the Ultramarines campaign. You have to level them up a certain amount. It's a necessary evil, but unfortunately you can't use them in a lot of other areas. Now, on the other hand, we have Yarick. If you were smart enough to see my video that came out right after the game came out, in the beginning, if you are going to spend any money in this game, $5 for Yarick is the best money that you will spend. So in case you didn't see that in the other video, there's a super special tip for you. He is a summoner. Once you get his Cadian guardsmen leveled up, um, they are insane. He summons 4 of them as long as you have the space to do it, and they one-shot everything. They also generally don't get taken down in only one shot. So all of a sudden you've got him plus 4 other characters, so he's almost a team just by himself. And then when one of them runs away because of battle fatigue, he gives all the rest of them extra damage, and he prevents any of the other ones from running away. Not just his summons, but any summons. So any of the summons that have the battle fatigue, any of them will be stopped from running away from the rest of the battle if he's still on the field. He's not that strong on his own, unfortunately. His melee attack is okay. He does have a shooting attack, so at least he's got some range. He's not very tanky, but his summons are so ridiculously powerful right now that it's frustrating to play against them, and he really takes over the arena. Just make sure you know his summons do not do much piercing damage, so he can't get through armor. So try to avoid using your summons on Bellator, because Bellator will just eat it up. Most other characters, his summons will do some pretty good damage to, but try to avoid anything with Gravis armor. Mostly the Bellators is what you're going to see out there, but Yarick is insane. If you manage to get him, if you want to spend money on him, I don't know if they're going to bring back the $5 deal again later on, so if you didn't hop on it, I'm sorry. Or if you're free to play, I'm sorry, but they do have a lot of good other options for you being free to play. But he's just very, very powerful and good to have. Cut Skoden. He looks really cool. He's the first boss you end up going against in the Fall of Cadia campaign. You would think he would be tanky, but he's not that tanky. He does have a little bit of AoE damage, but it's Blast, which right now doesn't pierce very much. And really, only does a little bit of damage to swarms and a little bit of AoE damage, so he's okay. He's again another one of those necessary evils that you're going to need for the campaign, the Fall of Cadia mirror, but unfortunately he's just not very strong. I will put him at the bottom of C tier, um, but I mean, he could probably just as easily go in D, and he doesn't have a ranged attack. Well, I mean, I guess he does because he's throwing the bombs, but for the most part, you've got to get up close with him, and he's not super tanky. You really wish that he had a little bit more. When he does move into melee the first time, just like a charge on the tabletop game, he does more damage, but again, not super strong. Thaddeus Noble is very cool. I like Thaddeus Noble a lot. He adds a different mechanic to the game that is very helpful, both in story mode, the campaign mode, and in the tournament arena. Because what he can do is he can sit in the back and he can actually shoot out these barrages that can go anywhere on the map. When you play against these little dudes, in the Fall of Cadia campaign, you'll know how annoying they can be because they can force people from not being able to sit still. So that is going to become super helpful in the tournament arena mode when you want people not just to sit back and keep passing all their turns. He can just chuck a bunch of damage down. So it's a really neat mechanic having the ability to do that. We're going to put him up in the A tier. If we start seeing more characters like Celestine, if more people start getting Celestine, she counters him really well because she can jump straight to the back and one-shot him. But he's pretty awesome. Once you get him, go ahead and level him up. It's a lot of fun to just have him sit back in the corner and start throwing barrage bombs down all over the map. Let's, I don't know where I want to put him. Let's move him down a little bit. He's not super tanky, and it is an ability that can be countered, but it's a really unique mechanic, so I like that he has that in the game. The last of our Imperial Guard, Castellan Creed. I don't see a ton of him around, but he has two cool things. One is he is a summoner. He does a couple of neat things where he can summon 2 guardsmen, and then any other guardsman, like any that you've summoned with Yarick, can move again. So he's kind of got a combination of summoning and Makatep's ability to make summons move again. Plus, he has Celestine's ability where he can get saved from death because a little dude jumps down and saves him instead of him dying, so he can't get one shot. I can't wait to get my hands on him because he is incredible. Once you get to him, it's kind of a shame that you can't buy him early on like you can Yarick. But once you get your hands on him, make sure to get him way leveled up. He is awesome. He's just a great character to have. He's a neat combination of a few different characters and their abilities. So he's a beast. Damage right now that the Deathwatch characters just can't keep up. And even though some of them are relatively tanky, unfortunately, they're just not tanky enough to be able to survive and continue to do damage. So we are going to put him right in here. He may very well be the best of the Deathwatch characters, but again, they're not ultra strong at the moment. Maladus, I'm pretty sure everybody gets him. He comes along in the first 10 pull they give you. He's pretty cool. He can run in and do some AoE damage. One of the nice things is that when he kills things, it's kind of like an automatic overkill, so they won't come back to life, which is really helpful. And that can be nice for things like summons, or if we start to see Necrons take over the meta. Unfortunately, you can't use him in the campaign against any Necrons, so if they come out with a different campaign maybe in the future where you're fighting Necrons, that can be really helpful, but overall, He's medium tanky. He's not very fast. He does have some decent damage, so that's nice, especially for the Death Guard, but he's not going to be the most useful for you. Nauseous Rotbone, he is a healer, and if you have him in your team again, he can do things much like Incisus does, where when he jumps in and heals the whole team back up, it can really make a difference. And I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping as this game moves along, we'll start to see more people being able to use faction-specific teams. If you have a Chaos team, he is going to be able to heal Chaos units more. And he doesn't heal Imperial units. So if you have an all Chaos team, he can be pretty powerful. It's kind of neat to have him around. But again, he, like Incisus, is going to be very specific in what he can do. You can only use him in certain situations, but I hope that he becomes more powerful later on. His one unique thing is that he can potentially bring something back even if it's been overkilled, which is kind of cool. But again, gotta be Chaos. So you're only putting him on Chaos teams, and right now you're not going to see a lot of people running only Chaos. You do have some options with the Black Legion to run them with not Rotbone, but right now, again, we're just not seeing that too awful much. Pestillion, he is another summoner. Um, oh, nope, he's not the summoner. Hold on. Um, he is just a buffer right now, which is not super strong. Um, and so you're not going to see him a ton. Again, if you can get that all chaos team, he can work with the other Death Guard units. I think in the future in this game, they are going to have these buffing characters buff a little bit more than they are right now. I think they are going to make them stronger to encourage these mono faction teams, because right now the buffing characters are just not very useful. Characters that can summon are way overpowered. So hopefully at some point in time, as updates come along with this game, those power levels will kind of squeeze together and we'll have more in the middle. But right now, buffing characters, psyker characters, healing characters, a lot of them are down at the bottom right now. Just not incredibly useful. Corrodius is the one who pops down Pokwalkers. Unfortunately, all they can do is attack in melee. They can't move after he drops them down. So a lot of times you'll see it's better if you are doing it, but especially when you see like the computer, when you're going against them in the normal arena, he pops one Poxwalker down right next to them. And I guess he's got a chance to do it and more, but it's such a low chance. You pretty much only ever drop one down, and you have to hope that it drops in the hex next to an enemy unit so it can attack them. But they're not super strong. They get one hit. He's not terribly tanky. So, in my opinion, right now, he's the worst summoner in the game. He's still relatively powerful because he's a summoner, but he's just not very good overall. That'll do it for our Death Watch. Um, I will give this disclaimer again. There are not many Black Templars out there. There's not a lot of videos to watch. Not a lot of people have them. I don't have any of them um, on either of my accounts right now, so it's really difficult to rank them because we haven't really seen them in action a lot. They do all have the parry ability, which in theory makes them stronger in close combat, which is in general the stronger way to be attacking people right now. But only being -1 hit, generally a lot of the multi-attack characters are pretty strong. And so even if you are doing that, generally you're still taking quite a bit of damage. This guy has the ability, much like the Killican does, to run in and push somebody off and then take that spot over. So again, in the tournament arena, that can be kind of cool. But he's again, these Black Templar characters are not the strongest ever. You'll see he does have the ability to reduce some defense, which is nice, but again, armor is a weird stat in that if you manage to block things, it's super helpful, and if you have a ton of armor, it's really helpful, but it's kind of a weird mechanic at the moment, and um, you're not really seeing much from it. We will start him down in the C tier. So I'm trying to get these guys ranked, but again, I don't have a ton of experience with them. Brother Burchard, as you can see, is an aggressor. If you know those from the tabletop game, which means he has that Gravis armor, which is very cool. He's also going to have the ability to do some AoE damage, but the problem right now, as we talked about before, blast damage sucks. It is the worst of the damages that you can have outside of just normal physical. It also sucks, but um, so again, he is going to come in down here. He thankfully is more tanky than our Bulgrin dude is, but again, he can't do a ton of damage, and his AoE really isn't going to do much either, so he's not going to be super useful. I just built a bunch of aggressors for my tabletop game, for my Raven Guard successors, and they look sick, but just like in the tabletop game, they look really cool, but they're not super effective, unfortunately. So again, he's pretty cool. He'll be relatively tanky, but if you get him, don't be the most excited about it ever. Here's our ancient. He is much like Tigurius in that he can give things around him block, which is very cool. He can have things ignore battle fatigue. Um, the other really neat thing, but is not super powerful, as you see that number down there, is he can make things fight on death. Um, they call it Final Vengeance in this game, but it's really fight on death from the tabletop. But they only do 2 damage. He's got to be next to him when they do it. So it's kind of a neat thing to have. But again, you'll see a lot of the characters that are lower on the tier list. They are going to be there because the things that they can do are situational. So, like our healers down here, it's very cool if your whole team is about to die and they run in and heal the whole team back up, and they can turn a battle around. But 75% plus of the battles, you're not going to be able to do that, and so they are not going to be very helpful. So again, Thoriad is like a weird version of Tigurius, but he just doesn't do very much damage, and he doesn't do AoE damage. So he's going to go way down here in the D tier. Brother Jaeger, he is a beat stick, so he can actually jump in and destroy somebody pretty well. And he also has a taunt, which is really unique. So if you get him and you get him leveled up in the tournament arena, he can be very powerful because it's almost like Dante from the Blood Angels, his ability in the tabletop game, but he can taunt somebody. Right now, that's the only character that we have in this game that can do that, and it's very neat. He's relatively tanky, um, and he does quite a bit of damage, so that's really nice. And then when you see this little symbol, he's one of the ones that does have final damage, or sorry, final vengeance. So when he dies, he does fight back. So it's pretty neat for him to jump in, draw the attacks from somebody, and then when he does die, he at least gets to attack back. So that can be pretty helpful. Brother Jaeger's probably the most powerful, I would say, of the Black Templars, but again, unfortunately, none of them are super powerful. And the other problem right now is not a lot of people have access to their shards, so you can't get them leveled up super well. So here's another example. High Marshal Helbrecht, super cool looking model. He just looks amazing, and a very cool character in the lore and on the tabletop. Um, he does okay, as you can see from his second ability, against psychers, which we see also from Roswitha, but he is a buffing character. He does some decent damage, um, just like his buddy Brother Jaeger, but his abilities are not as useful. So unfortunately, you're probably not going to use him a ton. He's going to be a buffing character just like our Ancient, but he does hit a little bit stronger, and he does start out as a legendary. So if you're lucky enough to get him fairly early on in the game, he can be a lot of fun to use, but he is just I don't know. He's not the strongest character out there. All of the Black Templars, we haven't seen a ton of them yet, so it's hard to know what some of their synergies might look like. And in this game so far, I've tried to do a lot of, like I said, when I did my first tier list, I tried to have a lot of information with the numbers and base them on what the stats were. But it doesn't seem like all of that translates into the game as much as it would. So this one now is based a little bit more on experience, and what I've seen from the different modes and what are going to be helpful. Again, if you have a summoner, for the most part, any of the summoners are going to be strong enough. Corodius is going to be the one that is not super strong, but having a summoner is still strong because it basically gives you an extra character. So even if you're summoning something extra that's taking damage, at least it's not your normal character and their abilities and their higher damage levels that are taking it. I still think Archimados is the best in the game, but I do think Creed and Yarrick are right there with him. So these three, I think, are kind of like in that God tier, if you want to go that high. I really do think like S to F tiers is enough. I know a lot of people like to add some extra tier levels in there, but S to F is fine. Um, it's a relatively healthy spot, I guess, to have everything kind of in the middle like this, but really summoners being so strong right now is really difficult. Flyers can also be good, so you'll notice a couple of the characters that can fly. It's nice because it's hard to see sometimes what the terrain is going to be, and when you're playing that game of chicken, having your characters that can move greater distances before they do their damage is extremely helpful. I know this is running a little bit long. You guys were awesome about liking, subscribing, leaving comments on my last video, so hopefully you'll do that with this one as well. Hopefully this helps some of the newer players out to let what is going to be good to level up and what's going to be strong, the characters you're going to want on your team. And again, like I've told everybody before, you can't go wrong putting resources into your characters who you use in the campaign. So go back and look at my previous videos, see the characters that you use in those campaign, some of those 3 character levels that you can only use those characters, and you're going to have to get them leveled up for that, as much as it sucks. And right now, the other game modes like the tournament arena, the regular arena, their rewards are not so great that you need to have great arena teams. You can be in the middle of the arena and still beat enough people that you're getting Harken shards, that you're getting the rewards, that you're getting all the crates every season. So you don't have to stress out about having an extremely strong arena team, even though it's nice for bragging rights and pride. Hopefully you guys learned something from this. Thanks again for listening to me. My name is Koosh Doctor. You'll see that everywhere. And I'll see you guys in the Discord and for future videos. Thanks again for sticking with me.